Yo, what's up guys? Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to hit rank 1 with on the arena ladder. As you can see from the untapped screenshot, I'm currently 25 and 4 with this deck, so it's been performing really well for me. And now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTG zone link down in the description. If you click on that, you'll have the full deck list there that you can import into arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. And I'm also in the process of writing a full text article about this deck for MTG zone premium that will have more details, a full sideboard guide, how I change the deck for best of 1, and some tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well. So as soon as that's finished and up, I'll link that down in the description as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my white-black Reezug sacrifice deck in Alchemy. And as the name suggests, this is a deck that is largely built around this new card from the latest Alchemy set, Reezug the Bone Cobbler. And I really like this card, I think it's really cool. So this is a 2-mana legendary creature, it's a 1/3, and you can tap it, target creature in your graveyard perpetually becomes an artifact. You may cast the card this turn, and it loses all other card types. So this is really nice because it basically allows you to replay creatures from your graveyard as artifacts, so they're no longer creatures when you play them. And this is really powerful if the creature you're bringing back has a really powerful ability, because, you know, say for example, Shieldred. Shieldred is a really powerful card. The 4/5 body is obviously relevant in a lot of situations, but the most powerful thing about Shieldred is its ability. A lot of decks really struggle to beat Shieldred, and they kind of rely on creature removal to be able to kill it. So if we bring back Shieldred with Reezug as an artifact, not many decks are going to be running artifact removal, especially not against you, because you have no other artifacts in the deck. So bringing back a creature like Shieldred that has a really powerful ability allows you to still have the ability consistently throughout the course of the game, but the opponent can't kill it with creature removal, which is really powerful. So as I go through the rest of the cards, I'm going to explain which cards work well with Reezug as we go, because there are some really nice synergies with this card. So starting off at the 1-drop slot, we've got 4 Cursebound Witch, 4 Shambling Ghast. So these are both really good cards to sacrifice. So Cursebound Witch, 1 mana 1/2, when it dies, draft the card from its spellbook. I'm not going to go through every single card from the spellbook now because it will take a while. If you read my article, I'll go through every single card and explain which ones are good to pick. But Cursebound Witch gives you really good payoff for sacrificing the witch. You know, there are some really nice cards you can get off the spellbook. Even the less good ones still give you stuff to do with your mana. And even though it's not got the best ability ever, it is nice to bring back with Reezug as an artifact, because we have Rite of Oblivion and Braids as our sacrifice payoffs, both of which we can sacrifice as an artifact. You know, especially with Braids as well, it's nice bringing back Cursebound Witch and Shambling Ghast with Reezug, because not many other decks other than maybe the Anvil deck or mirror matches are going to have artifacts in play. So if we sacrifice a Cursebound Witch that we bring back with Reezug, if the opponent doesn't have an artifact, that's guaranteed to draw us a card and the opponent loses 2 life off the Braids, and we still get the death trigger as well, because it still retains its abilities when we bring it back with Reezug. So Cursebound Witch, nice sacrifice fodder for Rite of Oblivion and Braids, and also decent to bring back with Reezug to give us more sacrifice fodder later in the game. Then Shambling Ghast, 1 mana 1/1, when it dies, either target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, or create a treasure token. Both of these abilities are really nice. You know, the -1/-1 is especially nice against a deck like Mono Red, where a ton of their creatures have 1 toughness, so you can use this to pick off their early threats. Makes it very difficult for them to attack in the early game as well, because, you know, Big Spender and Tiefling Outcast, for example, are typically cards they're going to be playing on turn 1 or 2, and them attacking into a Shambling Ghast because of the -1/-1 ability is really good. Even outside of that, the treasure token is always going to be beneficial, especially in the early game. It allows us to ramp into our very powerful 4-drops earlier in the game. If they kill it on turn 1, it allows us to play our 3-drops on turn 2. And just having treasure tokens lying around is very useful later in the game for us to sacrifice to stuff like Rite of Oblivion or Braids as well. And again, same with Cursebound Witch, it is nice to be able to bring back with Reezug to give us more sacrifice fodder off Rite of Oblivion and Braids later in the game as well. Then at the 2-drop slot, obviously I've already gone over Reezug. We've also got Alas Ilkor Sadistic Pilgrims. This is a 2-mana 2/2 legendary creature. It has Death Touch, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, we gain a life, and whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is really good in most matchups, especially against aggro though, because the fact it has Death Touch means that it's very difficult for the opponent to attack into it unless they have First Strike or Double Strike. It trades off with basically every creature. You know, it basically stonewalls stuff like Shieldred because it has Death Touch itself. The fact that it gains us a life when creatures enter the battlefield under our control is really huge against, first of all, the aggressive decks like Mono Red and Gruul, and Mono White as well. I've seen some Humans decks recently, but those are the sorts of decks that really want to get you down to a low life total, and then especially Mono Red tends to run burn spells like Lightning Strike, so the ability to buffer our life total with this is huge. We have a lot of cheap creatures that we can put into play to trigger this often. You know, obviously we've got Cursebound Witch and Shambling Ghast. We've also got Wedding Announcement, which puts tokens into play, so it's very easy for us to start buffering our life total off this, which is, like I said, very important against the aggressive decks, but also especially important against the Anvil decks or other sacrifice decks in general, because that is a deck that is trying to burn you out off stuff like Only Cult Anvil or Blood Artist. So The fact that this buffers our life total and makes it very difficult for the opponent to attack into is really strong against the aggressive decks. Then at the other end of the spectrum against the control decks, it also enables us to drain the opponent out. Obviously we've got a sacrifice sub-theme going on with Rite of Oblivion and Braids. Shieldred kind of plays into that theme as well because it's just good at swinging the life total race, so getting additional drain off Elasil Core is really nice, especially against control decks if they're running destruction-based sweepers like Depopulate for example, because it just damages the opponent as they destroy our creatures as well. So Elasil Core, mainly good against the aggressive decks, but is also pretty good against the controlling decks at just getting in for extra damage as well, which is nice. And then we've got 4 copies of Rite of Oblivion, so this is one of our big sacrifice payoffs. 2 mana sorcery, as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a non-land permanent, exile target non-land permanent, and then it has flashback for 4, so we get 2 activations off this, which is really nice because of the flashback. So this is huge because it's just generic removal for any permanent that we need, whether it's a planeswalker like Tasha or a big creature like Shieldred for example. This basically just deals with anything that isn't an opposing Lae'zel because that has somewhat protection from single target removal, but this is just so strong because even though we're only running 4 copies of Rite of Oblivion, because it has flashback, that doubles up as 8 removal spells. We have a lot of sacrifice fodder between Curse-Bound Witch, Shambling Ghast. The tokens that we create off Wedding Announcement can also be good sacrifice fodder, and then we can obviously bring these cards back with the Reezug to sacrifice again. So Rite of Oblivion, really, really strong as just generic removal that deals with basically any problematic permanent, and this is one of the big reasons to bleed in white-black over something like red-black, just because Rite of Oblivion is such an efficient removal spell, and it can be used to take out, you know, bigger creatures later in the game because of the flashback as well. So really, really nice sacrifice payoff here. Then at the 3-drop slot, starting off, we've got 4 copies of Wedding Announcement, 3 mana enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, put an invitation counter on it. If you attacked with 2 or more creatures this turn, you draw a card, otherwise you just create a 1/1 token, and then once it hits 3 counters, it transforms into Wedding Festivity, which gives you creatures +1/+1. So this is really huge, again, for a number of reasons. So first of all, I think one of the biggest weaknesses of running white-black over red-black is you lose access to Onicult Anvil. Onicult Anvil being able to produce tokens regularly is really good at producing chump blockers against the aggressive decks, and also allows you to chump block powerful creatures like Lae'zel if you're against an Esper deck that has a fast start. So Wedding Announcement does a similar thing, you know, being able to pump out tokens against the aggressive decks allows you to chump block, which gives you good time to stabilize. On the flip side, against the control decks, it produces tokens that are very difficult for the opponent to interact with favourably. You know, if the opponent is playing a deck like Esper where they're relying on a lot of single target removal to stabilise, they don't really have a good way to interact with Wedding Announcement other than Invoke Despair, which they typically don't run because that's more of a mono black card. So it makes it, you know, you're putting threats into play that are difficult for the opponent to interact with if they're running single target removal. If you're against a control or slower deck in general, it's just putting threats into play that you can start attacking with. If you start attacking with multiple creatures, you can draw a card instead, which is typically pretty good in the grindier matchups as well. And then obviously when it flips to the Wedding Festivity, your creatures get +1/+1, which is against the aggressive decks, makes it very hard for them to attack past because you have a buff to your whole board. And then obviously it's great against the slower decks as well because you can start increasing your clock by quite a lot and attacking in for a lot as well. So Wedding Announcement just does a lot, and the fact that it produces tokens kind of fills a hole in the white-black shell that the red-black shell generally does better at because of Anvil. So Wedding Announcement, really generically powerful card and does a lot of stuff in this deck. Next up, we've got Welcoming Vampire, and this is low-key one of the best cards in the deck. So this is a 3-mana 2/3 with flying, and whenever one or more other creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card, and this ability only triggers once each turn. So this is really huge because it's basically our card advantage engine, and this typically is the card that allows us to pull us ahead against other slower decks, against kind of like Esper Midrange. This is your best card. In other sacrifice mirror matches, this is your best card because it pulls you ahead. I've seen some other white-black sacrifice decks running Rata Drabic, and typically you just pull ahead and tend to win the long game off the back of Welcoming Vampire. So if we have a look at the cards in the deck, this triggers off Curse-Bound Witch, triggers off Shambling Ghast, triggers off Reezug, triggers off Elasil Core, triggers off each of the tokens that Wedding Announcement makes, which is a really nice synergy, and it even triggers off Lae'zel, so it triggers off one of our 4-drops as well. So going Welcoming Vampire into Lae'zel on turn 4 is a really nice curve out. So Welcoming Vampire, really, really huge because the format is pretty grindy at the moment. You know, Esper Midrange is still one of the best decks in the format. There's a lot of other variants of mid-range going on. Rakdos Anvil is still quite a slow deck as well, very attrition based, and since we have good ways to buffer our life total with Elasil Core and Shieldred, we typically don't have to worry about getting burnt out as much. So that matchup tends to go in terms of who gets ahead on card advantage, and Welcoming Vampire is huge there. And another really important thing about Welcoming Vampire is it's a really, really good card to bring back with Reezug. You know, the 2-3 flying body is obviously relevant. movement, and the fact it has flying is especially good at board stalls where you can't really attack past on the ground because it then allows you to get in for damage in the air. But the most powerful thing about this card is the ability, and so bringing this back with Reezug is really huge because it basically just gives you continuous card advantage in these grindy matchups that the opponent can't interact with. So bringing this back with Reezug against a deck like, you know, another white-black mirror, against red-black Anvil, against Esper Midrange, basically just makes it impossible for the opponent to outgrind you because you're going to be drawing so many cards off this, and it's impossible to interact with the opponent once you bring it back as an artifact as well. So Welcoming Vampire, such a huge card at giving you an edge in these grindy matchups. Next up, we've got 3 copies of Brazier Risen Nightmare. So this is a 3-mana 3/3. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. So similar to Rite of Oblivion, this is another sacrifice payoff in the deck. Obviously, we typically want to be sacrificing Cursebound Witch, Shambling Ghast, or the tokens off Wedding Announcement, or, you know, if we have treasure tokens from Shambling Ghast, or we bring back Cursebound Witch or Shambling Ghast as artifacts with Reezug, those are also great targets to sacrifice to Braids. But this is just great at continuously either making the opponent sacrifice stuff they don't want to, or just producing us card advantage and getting in for chip damage as well, because whilst we are good at grinding like a mid-range deck, we also have good reach in the late game because of cards like Braids dealing damage, because of cards like Elas Il-Kor and Shieldred also dealing damage, so the 2 life loss directly does make a difference with this card as well. And similar to Welcoming Vampire, this is another card that is really nice to bring back with Reezug because, again, whilst the 3/3 body is nice, the main thing that's powerful about this card is the ability. So bringing this back with Reezug as just an artifact that allows us to sacrifice a card to make the opponent sack or draw us a card every single turn is really good. So this is another card that works really well with Reezug. I completely forgot to mention as well, sorry, Elas Il-Kor is also another card that is pretty nice to bring back with Reezug as well. Not as exciting as Welcoming Vampire or Braids, but having the having the ability to gain a life whenever a creature enters the battlefield and kind of drain the opponent when our creatures die, that the opponent can't interact with, is very nice, especially against an Anvil deck where typically, you know, they're not going to be able to burn you out past the life gain you're getting off this, and they're not going to be able to interact with an artifact version of Elas Il-Kor really either. So those are the 3 drops. Now onto the top end of the deck. 3 copies of Lae'zel, 4 mana 2/4 with Double Strike. Yeah, a specialised one, so you can pay 1 and discard either a white or black card to specialise it into either the white or black variant of Lae'zel. And the really powerful thing about this card is that the first time it's targeted with a spell or ability, well, it's not the first time. You choose when to exile it, but when this creature becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may exile it and return it to the battlefield. So that's really strong because it gives it inherent removal against single target interaction, which is pretty huge, and it becomes even more powerful because once you specialize it, we either specialize it into this the white version, which we can see on the right here. When it specializes, you seek a non-land permanent card with mana value 3 or less. So if we specialize it into the white version, we get to seek, obviously, a card. And then if the opponent targets it with single target removal, we can exile it and return it to the battlefield. And then we get that trigger again. We get to seek another card. And then the black version, when it specialises, you return up to 2 target creatures with total mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is great because it allows us to reanimate Welcoming Vampire, Braids, or we could do like Elas Il-Kor on one of our 1-drops. So Lae'zel, just such a generically powerful card. The fact it's a 2/4 double strike, which is already really good stats to start off with, and then when you specialise it, it goes into a 3/6. It turns into a 4/7 double strike once we have Wedding Announcement flipped as well. So this is just a really strong offensive card that has good protection from interaction. And has good utility off the specialise as well. So Lae'zel is such a powerful card in this deck, and allows you to really get on the front foot against the slower decks as well, whilst being a very difficult blocker to get past as well for the aggressive deck. So just a generically powerful card, really strong. Not much synergy with the Reezug here. I've not actually tested whether you can specialise it once it's an artifact, but having to spend 4 mana to bring it back and then another mana, you're essentially just paying 5 mana to get a specialise. So typically not a good card to bring back with Reezug, but just a generically powerful card when you have it on the battlefield. And then finally, 3 copies of Shieldred the Apocalypse. This is probably the most meta-defining card in the format right now, or one of the most powerful cards anyway. So this is 4 mana 4/5 with Death Touch. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. So the ability on this is so powerful. Like I said, there are a lot of decks that are trying to either aggressive decks that are trying to deal lethal to you quickly, or decks like Anvil that are typically trying to drain you out over the course of the game, and Shieldred on its own basically just stops you losing those sorts of matchups. gaining 2 life when you draw a card is huge. Obviously, you draw a card for turn, but we also can draw multiple cards off stuff like Welcoming Vampire, off Braids as well, off Wedding Announcement if we're attacking with multiple creatures. So it's very easy to buffer our life total so high that we can just completely put those games out of reach. Then on the flip side, it pressures our opponent's life total. We're pretty good at doing that off stuff like Braids and LS Ilcore anyway, not to mention us attacking in the early game as well. So Shieldred is just a really powerful card that runs away with the game if the opponent can't kill it. And even if they can kill it, like I said earlier, we can bring it back with Reezug. And I think this is probably the most powerful interaction in the deck with Reezug, because so many decks just can't beat the Shieldred ability, especially Rakdos Anvil. You know, Anvil is a deck that typically struggles against Shieldred anyway. The only ways that they can really beat Shieldred is either having one of their own to counteract yours, or having a removal spell like an Infernal Grasp to kill it. And if you bring it back with Reezug, that basically just shuts off their ability to deal with it entirely. And having a Shieldred just as an artifact, if the opponent can't deal with it, is just going to completely run away with the game as well. So Shieldred, such an important card in the deck, and the ability to bring it back with Reezug is so big as well. So that's the main deck. Now onto the mana base. 25 lands has felt like the right amount for this deck, because we have so much stuff to do with our mana. You never really run out of stuff to do with this deck, because you have, you know, Welcoming Vampire is going to be drawing you cards, Braid is going to be drawing you cards, we can bring back stuff with Reezug, we can specialise Lae'zel, so we're always going to have stuff to do with our mana, and we really don't want to be missing land drops. You know, the way this deck most commonly loses just to itself is missing land drops, so I feel like 25 has been the right amount. In terms of the actual lands themselves, we've obviously got the playable 2 white-black dual lands. Forsaken Crossroads as well has been really important as just mana fixing. The Scry on this is also really nice when we need it as well, which is nice. Eiganjo and Takenuma are basically free to run. These are both very efficient. Obviously Eiganjo works very nicely as a removal spell. Takenuma is especially nice in this deck because we're running so many legendary creatures. You know, we've got Lae'zel, Shieldred, Braids, LS Ilcore and Reezug, so we can often reduce this to 1 or 2 mana pretty efficiently, which is nice. Allows us to rebuy stuff from the graveyard, and then we've just got some basics to round the deck out. So that's the deck. I've been really impressed with the main deck. It's felt so nice. You know, it's got very good tools to grind in the mid-range matchups, which are very popular. Aggro and sacrifice decks are the other 2 main ones, and we have so many ways to stabilize and gain life against those sorts of deck off like LS Ilcore and Shieldred. Lae'zel is very difficult to attack past. Wedding Announcement puts blockers into play. So yeah, I really like this deck in the current meta. It's been performing really well. Then onto the sideboard. Starting off, we've got 4 copies of Cathar Commando. So this is a 2-mana 3/1 with flash. We can pay 1 to sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. So this is here pretty much exclusively for the Anvil decks. I like this over other options to kill artifacts and enchantments because it's a really nice card to bring back with Reezug. You know, we can flash this in, take out like an Oni-Cult Anvil for example, then replay it with Reezug and just sacrifice it again to kill like a Sanguine Brushstroke or something later in the game. There are also some other enchantments that people are running. You know, Cabaretti Revels, whilst it's seeing less play, is still a very threatening very threatening enchantment. So having Cathar Commando as an answer to that is really nice. But mainly here is just a way to stop the engines of the Anvil decks, and you can replay it with Reezug, which is nice. Then we've got 3 copies of Valorous Stance. It's a 2-mana instant. Choose 1. Target creature gains indestructible until end of turn, or destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater. So I've been really impressed with this card because it serves a really important dual purpose. It kills bigger creatures, which is relevant in a lot of matchups, and provides you with protection against decks that are running a lot of single target removal. So I particularly like this card against Esper, for example, because it allows us to take out opposing Shieldreds. It allows us to take out Diviner of Fates once they've got a Connive counter on it. It allows us to take out Rafine, whilst also allowing us to protect our own creatures like Shieldred or Reezug or Braids from their destruction-based removal. I've seen quite a lot of dragons on the ladder as well because of the release of the new dragons in the latest set as well. So Valorous Stance allows you to kill the dragons pretty easily as well because they all have bigger than 4 toughness. So this is basically good in any matchup where you expect Shieldred or other bigger creatures as a way to kill them, you know, like I said, against dragons and stuff like that as well. And also very good against decks that are running a lot of single target destruction based removal like Infernal Grasp at protecting your own creatures. Then we've got 4 copies of Cut Down. So 1 mana instant, destroy target creature with total power or toughness 5 or less. So this is just very good against creatures that, against decks that are running a lot of small creatures. So particularly mono red or Gruul Werewolves or mono white aggro, for example. Basically any low to the ground aggressive deck. This just gives us an efficient way to interact within the early game to try and stabilize. You typically don't want to bring this in against the more mid-range decks because a lot of their creatures, their stats outscale this pretty easily. You know, against Esper you can take out stuff like Diviner of Fates or Rafine before it starts conniving, but if it connives once and then you draw this later, it's pretty inefficient. So you typically only really want to bring this in against the very low to the ground aggro decks, but against a deck like Mono Red, this is just so good at helping you stabilize, because they can get off to fast starts, especially when you're going second. Then we've got 2 copies of Unlicensed Hearse, so this is a 2-mana artifact, it's a vehicle. Tap it, exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard, and then its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards exiled with it, and then it's also got crew too. So this is very important as graveyard hate, because I have noticed a pretty big influx of decks that are interacting with the graveyard. You know, I've seen some Reanimator. I've also seen quite a lot of Oracle of the Alpha decks that are trying to loop Time Walk over from the graveyard over and over again. And Unlicensed Hearse just basically shuts off those types of strategies entirely. I was previously running Viconia in this slot as graveyard hate, but I'm not a big fan of Viconia against those sorts of decks where graveyard hate is very important, because you basically have to consistently hold mana open to shut off their graveyard. It's obviously a creature, so it's vulnerable to interaction as well, whereas Unlicensed Hearse is much more difficult to interact with, and you don't have to hold up any mana to constantly exile the opponent's graveyard. So against any of the graveyard decks, you know, I think there are a decent number of the Oracle of the Alpha decks are trying to capitalize on the lack of graveyard hate in the format, so running graveyard hate capitalizes on the weaknesses of those decks as well. And then finally we've got 2 copies of the Mythic Massacre, so when it enters the battlefield, each creature gets -X/-X until end of turn, and then whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So similar to Cut Down, this is just another card that's very nice to bring in against the low to the ground aggressive decks like Mono Red, where you can just sweep their board, take out all of their small creatures, and then it sticks around on the battlefield to drain the opponent out as well. It can also be nice to bring in against the Sacrifice mirror matches as well, if you want to force through extra damage that way to try and drain the opponent out. But for the most part, this is just an extra tool for us to deal with the go wide aggressive decks that can sometimes outscale your single target removal, like Mono Red, like Mono White aggro as well. So that's the sideboard and the deck in general. I've been really impressed with it. I've been trying to refine both red black and white black, and I've been trying tons of different ideas, and this has definitely felt like the strongest out of all of them. I feel like the meta game right now is largely mid-range, you know, mainly Esper, but loads of different shells of mid-range, aggressive decks like Mono Red, Mono White, and Gruul, and then also the Sacrifice variants. And I feel like this particular deck has tools to be able to outgrind the mid-range decks, stabilize against the aggro decks, and to stabilize against the Anvil decks as well. So it's just generally felt really well positioned to me overall. Next up, we've got some gameplay. I've just got 5 matches that I was playing with this deck on the ladder, so you guys can see it in action. If you've got any questions about the deck at all, drop me a comment below, and I hope you enjoy the gameplay. Big up. Okay, sweet. Here we go. Okay, so we're going first here, and I can't keep a 1-land, especially, you know, only have 1 colour of mana. This, I mean, obviously we've got a ton of 3-drops, but I think on a 6 we have to keep this. We have a lot of good options, you know, that we could draw for the first couple turns. Going to leave on the Shattered Sanctum here because it's not going to be entering untapped until turn 3, so we might as well play it now while we don't have a 1-drop. Okay, Kimano faces Kakazan, so if I had to guess, I'd probably say against Mono Red. Going to play the Crossroads now, and I think, yeah, happy to keep the Rite of Oblivion on top, because if we are against Mono Red, we definitely want to keep removal if possible. And we have Wedding Announcement, which we can use to sacrifice tokens for the Rite of Oblivion. Okay, so definitely against Mono Red by the looks of things. They play Big Spender, so we are under quite a lot of pressure here. I think I'm going to go for the Wedding Announcement, because we could play Welcoming Vampire or Braids to trade with the Big Spender, but... or maybe even Braids to stop the Etching of Kimano attacking. But if they have any burn spell, that's a really bad play, you know, because at least if we play Wedding Announcement, if they have a burn spell here, they can take, if they choose to take out the 1/1, we're still going to be getting creatures to block with over the next couple turns. So I think Wedding Announcement is definitely better in the face of removal. We are taking a lot of damage here, but considering they've played 2 Tiefling Outcasts, I think we do want to keep this 1/1 back to block the Outcasts, to maybe incentivize them not to attack, but to be able to take it out so they don't get the buff anymore. Lae'zel is a nice draw here. I was tempted to either go for Braids or Welcoming Vampire, but Lae'zel is just much harder for them to attack past now. They can't use Molten Impact to kill it because we can just blink it in response, so they don't really have a good way to remove it. So they don't have great attacks. Oh, okay, they have Thundering Raiju, so they could just attack with everything now, and they do. I mean, I think we still have okay blocks here because we have the Lae'zel in play. Okay, so they get the double team off both the Outcasts, and they choose to buff the Big Spender here. So, how do we want to block here? So I think we want to try and kill one of the Outcasts if we can. We definitely have to block the Big Spender here. And then I think we probably want to... Actually, no, wait, hold on. Let me think here. No, actually, hold on. I think we probably want to block the Thundering Raiju. I don't know why I was thinking about blocking the outcast there. I think we block like this, we go down to 4, which is kind of scary considering they have burn spells, but we get to kill the Raiju, we get to kill one of the outcasts. Lae'zel survives, which is huge, you know, that can freely block Big Spender next turn. They can obviously, they choose not to play the outcasts off the treasure, which is interesting. So, what do we want to do here? We could go either Welcoming Vampire into Cursebound Witch, we could go Cursebound Witch, Rite of Oblivion, we could specialise the Lae'zel to get Braids into play and play Welcoming Vampire, so we have a lot of options here. I think just to be mana efficient and get bigger creatures into play, I think I prefer specialising Lae'zel here, getting Braids onto the battlefield, and then we can play the Welcoming Vampire and we'll still get the card draw off the Wedding Announcement here, which is nice. I think the main thing we're worried about at this point is just burn spells. And can we afford to sacrifice anything to Braids? I mean, we could sacrifice one of our creature tokens, but that feels kind of bad considering our creatures are just outsizing all of theirs at the moment. We could have sacrificed a land, but I don't think that's, you know, that's probably going to hurt us more than it hurts them in general. And we don't want to sacrifice the Wedding Announcement because that buff it's providing to our team is pretty meaningful at the moment. Okay, they have one Lightning Strike. That's scary. So basically any burn spell we die to now. But we do have multiple ways to gain life. You know, if we can draw Shieldred or an Elasil Core. I'm surprised they didn't play the Tiefling Outcast off the treasure last turn, because then they would have had better attacks this turn. I mean, I'm sure they're not going to attack here anyway, but... Okay. So I think we're pretty interested in trying to use Rite of Oblivion here just to stem the bleeding a little bit. I like playing Shambling Ghast first just in case we draw a Shieldred or something. We would like to get any of our life gain enablers into play if we can do so. So we're going to Rite of Oblivion the Big Spender here, and then we can either produce a treasure, or I think it's probably more beneficial just to use the Shambling Ghast to give the Tiefling Outcast -1/-1. Then I just want to get another creature in play as a blocker, because they do have a lot of haste creatures. You know, we want to make sure that we're not dying to haste creatures. We want to make sure that we're only vulnerable to burn spells now. And I think since we have enough blockers in play, we can afford to attack with Lae'zel here. You know, they would need 2 haste creatures in order to punish us for doing this. And I think since we don't have a life gain enabler, we do want to start turning the corner a little bit. I'm going to sacrifice the Cursebound Witch here, just because, you know, we get to use the spell book. And again, you know, we only really get punished by 2 haste creatures, which is pretty unlikely. They would need exactly 2 big spenders. Oh, okay, they just have the Lightning Strike anyway. Okay, so that kind of sucked. You know, we were a little bit slow at stabilizing there, but I think this matchup, especially post-board, should be good. So against Mono Red, I like bringing the Cut Down and the Meathook Massacres, and then Braids isn't as good, I don't think. You know, the 3/3 body is quite relevant, but we generally don't want to be sacrificing that much, and I think Reezug is probably just too slow in this matchup. Reezug is at its best in the grindier matchups. This matchup is all just about stabilizing. If we can stabilize, it's really hard for them to win, so... Bring in cheap removal. Meathook's especially good against Mono Red because they have so many 1 toughness creatures, you know, like Big Spender, like Tiefling Outcast. So, even though we lost that one, I think this matchup is pretty favoured overall. This hand is great. I think Shambling Ghast is one of the hardest cards for them to get past in the early game. You know, like I said, loads of their creatures are 1 toughness, so they can't really attack into it too easily. And even if they do, you know, and they don't have another creature that we want to kill, we can just make treasure tokens, which are always useful. So we're going to get Elasil Core into play here, which is another card that's very good in this matchup because it gains us life and is basically impossible for them to attack into with bigger creatures anyway. You know, it can kill their Thundering Raijus, can kill their Ambergris. Okay, they use Lightning Strike on it, that makes sense because the card is very good in this matchup. So I'm going to play another Shambling Ghast. We are drawing quite a few lands, but we do get to scry off this Crossroads to try and draw gas next turn. Okay, Rite of Oblivion, you know, it's not a threat, but it is pretty good here as just a hedge against their creatures, and Shambling Ghast is a good creature to sacrifice. Now, I was considering not attacking with the Shambling Ghast, but I don't think we really get punished by anything. All their haste creatures have 2 toughness, other than Thundering Raiju, which they don't have mana to cast, so if they play an Ambergris, we can block with Shambling Ghast and kill it with the -1/-1. If they attack with Big Spender, we can just block and get a treasure token anyway. Okay, they do have Big Spender. Be interesting to see if they attack here. Okay, I mean, I was considering using Cut Down and saving these Shambling Ghasts to use with the Rite of Oblivion, but they choose not to attack here, which is obviously good for us. You know, buys us a bit more time. So, with 2 Shambling Ghasts in play, we're not going to waste Rite of Oblivion on a Big Spender. I'd rather save that for a bigger threat. You know, something like a Thundering Raiju would be something I'd be interested in taking out. Okay, sweet, they do have it, so I'm glad we held on to the removal there. So, Now we could save the Rite of Oblivion entirely. Okay, so they do attack. I don't really want to give them the treasure off the big spender, so I think I like using cut down on the big spender, and then we can double block the Thundering Raiju here and just kill it with the -1/-1 counters off the Shambling Guards. Now that does mean we don't have any permanents in play for the Rite of Oblivion, but you know, if we draw anything that's not a land, that will give us something to use with the Rite of Oblivion. So even though using Shambling Guards to create treasures... Oh, wow, okay, perfect. I mean, that's not something we'd want to use with Rite of Oblivion, but that's a really good draw. But yeah, I mean, I think that play, you know, there is an argument to potentially just blocking with one of the Shambling Guards, making a treasure off it, and then using that treasure to use with Rite of Oblivion, which is a perfectly defensible play. But I think doing this, now we have both... You know, we have the 2-mana Rite of Oblivion and the flashback still available, so as long as we draw something that we can sacrifice with it, then that's fine. Okay, Traumatic Prank. That is a little bit scary because they're getting in for 4 and we're taking 1 damage each turn, but we're going to be counteracting that off the 2 life that we're gaining off the draws. Okay, Welcoming Vampire's great here. So now we can just start racing them, I think. They're kind of forcing us into attacking with the Traumatic Prank because we're going to be losing life during our up... Well, it can't block anymore, so we're kind of forced to attack. But I think that's kind of a good thing for us anyway, because we're already ahead on the life point race. We're already ahead on board. We still have removal in our hand, so... Assuming, and especially if we can draw a cheap creature, not only will that trigger the Welcoming Vampire here, but it will give us something good to sacrifice to Rite of Oblivion as well. Now, as things stand, we don't really want to be sacrificing Shieldred or Welcoming Vampire, but we have a lot of cards that we could potentially draw. Wow, Shivan Devastator. Okay, that is pretty scary. I think we definitely have to not block here, because if we don't draw something to sacrifice to the Welcoming Vampire... Okay, we do, but even if we hadn't, we would want to have the Welcoming Vampire available to sacrifice to Rite of Oblivion to kill that Shivan Devastator. So I think I'm happy to just attack with both here, and then we can just use Rite of Oblivion, sacrificing the tapped Welcoming Vampire to just get rid of that Shivan Devastator. And now the opponent's already down to 4, so they're going to be going down to 2 off the Shieldred, and then, you know, they're so far away from dealing us lethal because we've been gaining life off the Shieldred. I very much doubt they're going to be able to deal 11, or I guess they'd need 10 because of the Shieldred upkeep damage, but... Either way, I think we're in a great spot now. You know, they have to take out Shieldred or they're just going to die to their next draw step. So I think the only real point of contention in this match is whether it was right to double block with the Shambling Ghast. Again, I could have seen an argument to blocking with 1 and just using Rite of Oblivion, but we wouldn't have had another Rite of Oblivion activation at this point in the game. I guess we could have got punished if we hadn't drawn anything that was good to sacrifice to Rite of Oblivion, but I still think it was a fair play to make. So we should just win here, you know. Even if we could Rite of Oblivion the Rahilda, but even if they block the Shieldred here, they're just dead to their next draw step anyway. Mono Red doesn't have any ways to gain life, so they're just going to be dying to Shieldred in their upkeep. Okay, yeah, they realised and just let the damage through. Sweet. So we got there in game 2. Now obviously game 3 is going to be harder because we're on the draw, but like I said, I think this matchup is pretty good. We have a lot of interaction. We have a lot of life gain. Shieldred and Lae'zel are so hard for them to get past. Well, Wedding Announcement just constantly providing blockers is also hard for them to attack past, especially because, like I keep saying, a lot of their creatures have 1 toughness, which this deck can really take advantage of. So, yeah, Mono Red definitely feels like a pretty favourable matchup for this deck. Just gotta hope they don't have an insanely fast start. And we've got to make sure that we don't keep clunky hands here either. So, let's see what we get here. I don't know if the opponent's taking a while to get into the game. Like, they're surely just going to go first, right? Not the hardest decision ever. Unless they've disconnected, maybe. Maybe they have. Or maybe there's some issue them getting back into the game after this sideboard. Because it didn't take them the full 2 minutes. They definitely just sideboarded there. But yeah, either way, like I said, this matchup should be pretty good, especially with Cut Down and Meathook Massacre. You know, this is the matchup where they're both at their best, and that's like 6 cards that pretty drastically improve your chances of stabilizing. So this hand, you know, we don't have that much early interaction, but Meathook on 3 can still sweep a lot of their board. Wedding Announcement on 3 is usually fine. We have the Crossroads to try and scry towards a 1 on 2 drop as well, so even though this hand is a little bit slow, I think it's worth keeping, especially because we have this scry off this Crossroads here. So we're basically looking for a 1 or 2 mana card, or a Shieldred or something like that. So it looks like the opponent has something here. Okay, perfect. Shambling Ghast is ideal here. So it looks like the opponent has priority. I imagine they have like a Play with Fire or a 1 mana burn spell of some sort. Yeah, okay. So they fire it off now, which is interesting. Maybe they're trying to hit land drops themselves. But either way, I'm quite happy for them to just go face with that because... Okay, they do have a big spend, but yeah, I'm quite happy for them to go face because that's a burn spell that they could have used on like a Wedding Announcement token or a Shambling Ghast or something. So having Ghast here is really nice because it just makes their attacks with big spender really unappealing. Also means that they can't really afford to play another creature pre-combat if it has 1 toughness because we can just kill it with the Ghast. If they do attack here and we can get treasure, we can play Lae'zel on turn 3, which is pretty nice. Okay, they Traumatic Prank, which is a little bit annoying but not that bad because, you know, if we wanted to, we could just Meathook for 1 to kill our own Shambling Ghast and their big spender, and then we get a treasure token as well, but I don't think that's really worth it because we're going to get a 1-1 off the Wedding Announcement if we play it here, which is, you know, a pretty bad attack for the opponent if they do just attack their 2-1 into our 1-1 token here. And then we've got Meathook next turn, we've got Lae'zel. Now, I am a little bit worried about the Shambling Ghast dealing us 1 damage every turn, but like I said, if the opponent plays more stuff, we can just Meathook. So, okay, yeah, here we could just Meathook for 2, and then that would just get rid of the Shambling Ghast, so we don't take a damage every turn. So attack with the Ambergris. I mean, I think we're probably just going to be Meathooking next turn anyway, so we just want to prevent as much damage as we can, so we'll block the 3-2 rather than the 2-1. That does give them a treasure token. Hopefully that will incentivize them to play more stuff into the Meathook Massacre. So it doesn't look like they do, but we'll just attack with the Shambling Ghast here because it can't block, and then we can just Meathook for 2, and we get another treasure token, which is nice. Now again, we are flooding out a little bit here, but we're going to get a token off the Wedding Announcement, so we do have a blocker if the opponent does have another hasty creature, and we can also specialize the Lae'zel. I mean, we've only got a swamp in hand. And actually, yeah, we wouldn't want to specialise with the swamp because we actively don't want this Shambling Ghast back because it's just dealing us the damage every turn. But if we draw a white card, we can specialise on white. If we draw a black 2 or, you know, if we draw another black creature, we can then specialise the Lae'zel. Wow, they choose to use a Lightning Strike on the 1-1. I mean, we're very happy to see that. Okay, Rite of Oblivion's a nice one. You know, that gives us an answer to any bigger threats they play. I definitely think we're going to play Lae'zel here. Like I said, we don't want to specialise with Shambling Ghast being the only creature in our graveyard because that will just give a creature that's just going to deal us damage every turn. So I think here we can just specialise on white. Discard the Rite of Oblivion. You know, it has flashback, so we can still cast it from the graveyard. And we get a Curse-Bound Witch, which I'm just going to put into play because they could, you know, they have more hasty creatures. It's best to just get blockers into play. And now it's going to be really hard for them to attack. I feel like them using Lightning Strike on that 1-1 was a big mistake because they could have us down to 6 and put us in range of hitting other burn spells. We don't currently have any other ways to gain life, so I feel pretty good about this spot now. I think we can start attacking with the Lae'zels because we have enough blockers. We're also going to be playing the Welcoming Vampire here, which is another card that's going to be hard for them to attack past, especially with the Wedding Festivity buff that it provides. And now they're dead to another Lae'zel attack. They're kind of forced to chump block next turn. So definitely going to scry here with the Crossroads. Don't want another land. We're basically just looking for more gas, but they're already on the back foot here. I think unless they have, you know, triple Lightning Strike or something, it's going to be very hard for them to win this game now. Wow, Airbrask, okay. I mean, again, they don't really have good attacks because this Wedding Festivity is pumping our whole board. You know, we could just block with the 2-2 and the 2-3. Okay, we hit the Curse-Bound Witch, which, I mean, that's pretty good because now we can just play the Witch and flashback the Rite of Oblivion. We do get to draw a card off the Welcoming Vampire as well, which is really nice. Then we can just Rite of Oblivion the Airbrask, sacrifice the non-summoning sick Curse-Bound Witch here, puts them down to 7. Gonna take the Sorcerer's Broom just as another creature. And then attacks-wise, you know, we could attack with everything, but I think that's unnecessarily risky. I think I'm just going to attack with the Lae'zel and the Welcoming Vampire. And then we still have blockers back in case they draw a hasty creature. And then we're basically just guaranteed to win next turn anyway. You know, we could have got a bit more aggressive with the attacks, but I don't think that meaningfully speeds up our clock, so it doesn't really feel worth it. And I don't think there's anything they can draw now that will save them. So either way, they're just dead here. Yeah, okay, sweet. Nice, we got there. Okay, so we're going first here. And yeah, this hand looks good. You know, it's going first. It is a little bit annoying that we have 2 crossroads as 2 tap lands, but we do get to scry and we do get to... Oh, okay, sweet. We've got another untapped land, which is good. I was going to say, we do get to pick a point on the curve where we'll have the Swamp entering untapped, so we could have just gone crossroads, and then played Wedding Announcement on turn 3. But now we've got another untapped land that allows us to go Reezug into a 3-drop, which is nice. Now, it can be difficult to know whether to play Wedding Announcement or Welcoming Vampire first, because, you know, the temptation playing Vampire first is that you're going to get 3 draws off the Wedding Announcement each trigger, but I think it's typically better to get Wedding Announcement into play first because it just starts developing and applying pressure quicker. You know, if you can get to the 3rd chapter, not the 3rd chapter, but if you can flip the Wedding Announcement faster, that's going to really speed up your clock. And, you know, playing Welcoming Vampire also makes you a lot more vulnerable to interaction as well, because if you just play Welcoming Vampire on turn 3 and the opponent has like an Infernal Grasp or something, that's a pretty bad exchange for you, whereas Wedding Announcement is a lot more difficult for the opponent to interact with. Even though Welcoming Vampire will start drawing us cards, again, I think it's more important to just get on the front foot. You know, we're going first here. We've already got Wedding Announcement about to flip, so I like getting Shieldred in play on curve here. Just applies a lot more pressure for the opponent, puts them really on the back foot. And then we already have LS Core and and Wedding Announcement to trigger Welcoming Vampire. You know, next turn as well, which is nice. Okay, an untapped land is great here because we can now play, you know, we could either go LS Core and Wedding Announcement or LS Core and Welcoming Vampire. I think I prefer the Welcoming Vampire, just because it will start drawing us cards. You know, we're already ahead enough on tempo that I think we can afford to start making some value plays here. And I'm going to play the LS Core first just to gain us life, because we're still going to get the card draw off the Wedding Announcement here. If we weren't getting a token off the Wedding Announcement, I think it's better to play Welcoming Vampire first and then LS Core, because obviously drawing a card is more important than gaining life, but since we're getting the token anyway, it didn't really matter. Oh, wow, Depopulate. Okay, I wasn't expecting that. I mean, we do get a bunch of the LS Core triggers, and we still have pretty good ways to recover here. You know, getting Reezug here is nice. I mean, they're already down to 4, so I think unless they have a way to kill Reezug here, we have a pretty good way to win next turn, because if the Reezug survives here, we can get back... Okay, we don't want another land here, but we can get back Shieldred as an artifact, which is really nice, and then we can also play Braids, sacrificing one of these Wedding Announcements, assuming the opponent doesn't play an enchantment. So we just got to hope that Reezug survives here. Oh wow, Liesa's pretty scary, actually. I mean, thankfully, I think we should still be good to win here, because if we play Shieldred from the graveyard, the only way they can stop us winning here is if they have instant speed artifact removal. You know, if we played the Shieldred from hand, so the idea here is we go Braids, sacrifice Wedding Announcement, the opponent loses 2 life, we draw a card which puts them down to 2, and then Shieldred will be dealing them 2 off their draw step. The advantage to playing the Shieldred from the graveyard here is that it doesn't open them up to having instant speed interaction. You know, if they had another Fragment Reality, for example, during their upkeep they could kill the Shieldred before it triggers. Okay, yeah, opponent sees what's happening, but yeah, either way, that's one of the big advantages of being able to play Shieldred as an artifact, is it's much more difficult for the opponent to interact with. I guess if they did have Fragment Reality, they could kill the Shieldred as an artifact, but for the most part, it's much more difficult for them to kill. So we didn't see much of their deck there, so I'm not 100% sure what the opponent's on here, but Valorous Stance has to be good because, you know, we saw the Esper, which is a powerful card against us. They're probably running Shieldred as well if they're running Braids. So Valorous Stance gives us another answer to those and allows us to protect our own Shieldred and stuff like that. My only concern cutting Braids is that we are light on sacrifice payoffs. You know, if we cut Braids, we've only really got Rite of Oblivion as a payoff for having these, like Cursebound Witch, Shambling Ghast 1-drop. So I think I'm going to bring in 1 Braids and cut Cursebound Witch, because otherwise we might end up with hands with a lot of 1-drops and not many ways to sacrifice it. But But yeah, we didn't really get to see much of the opponent's deck, so I don't want to over sideboard here. I don't want to make too many assumptions. Okay, don't want to keep that hand because we don't have any white mana, and we could just get screwed by that. And this hand, you know, I think this is fine. You know, I'll put back the Shambling Ghast because I would rather play an untapped land on turn 2 for Celestial Core in this matchup. You know, we did see Braids, so I have to assume they've got some kind of sacrifice sub-theme going on, so the life gain that Celestial Core provides will probably be useful. Just got to hope that we hit our third land drop here, and then we should be fine, I think. Okay, sweet, we do. That's great. So I'm going to play Celestial Core over the Reezug here because, you know, it can start applying pressure a bit better, and it can start gaining us life. Like I said, I imagine they're playing some kind of drain synergies with Braids, so gaining life should be beneficial. And Reezug in general is better as the game goes on because, you know, you obviously want stuff in your graveyard to immediately get value off it. So I think we're definitely going to cast Wedding Announcement here. Drawing our 4th land is great with Lae'zel in hand, obviously. We'll see what the opponent does here. Okay, they play Scoured Barons. Wow, nothing else. Huh, okay. I mean, that makes me think they probably have a lot of removal. Or maybe they have another depopulate. So we could obviously play Lae'zel out here, but then I think we're really weak to a sweeper. So instead, I'm going to use Rite of Oblivion here to take out the Braids. Deals them a damage off the Celestial Core. We're going to get another token off the Wedding Announcement, obviously. And then we'll attack. And I'm going to play the Reezug here. The reason I don't want to play Lae'zel out, I mean, this does allow us to get a bit more aggressive. It gets that Braids out the way, which could provide value as the game goes on. But I'm worried about another depopulate here. If we play Lae'zel out, we don't have a good way to recover. Whereas now we actually have, you know, Lae'zel is a pretty good way to recover if they do have a sweeper. Okay, they have Divine Purge. I mean, that's kind of scary to know that they have it, because Divine Purge is generally pretty good against us. I mean, obviously Lae'zel survives it, but on the whole, Divine Purge is pretty good, especially against Reezug. You know, one of the big advantages of playing Reezug is that it's a lot more difficult for the opponent to interact with our artifacts, but they do have an answer for it now. Okay, they do have Lae'zel. That was another thing I was thinking, you know, since they played a tap land last turn, there was a chance that their hand has 4 drops in that they couldn't play. Okay, so they get back Braids, which is kind of scary. And they sacrifice a land, huh? I mean, I don't love it, and maybe this is incorrect, but considering they've only got 1 card in hand, and this is typically a grindy matchup, I really don't want to give them any extra cards. We're running a 25 land deck, so we're pretty likely to draw more lands, and we still have, like, decent plays anyway. You know, drawing Wedding Announcement is a little bit annoying, especially, you know, we've got 2 4-drops in the exile zone, so maybe it was a bit greedy to lose our 4th land here, but especially if I'd known I was going to draw Wedding Announcement, I don't think I would have sacked that land, because we could have gone either Celestial Core or Wedding Announcement into Shambling Ghast here, but I really don't want to give them any extra cards, because this seems like a very attrition-based spot in the game, if that makes sense. So giving them extra cards seems pretty bad if we can avoid it. And you know, we're running a 25 land deck, so it's not unlikely we'll hit our 4th land, and we don't really get that much more value past our 4th land. Okay, sick, we do. I mean, that was kind of lucky, I guess, but... So we have quite a few options for this turn. You know, Rite of Oblivion isn't ideal here because they have 2 Lae'zels. We could use Rite of Oblivion to take out Braids, but Braids isn't really doing anything for them at the moment. We could play Reezug from exile, we could play Celestial Core from exile. I think I like playing Celestial Core because, you know, it starts buffering our life total a little bit. We're going to get another token, so we'll gain more life. Once it untaps, it makes it difficult for them to attack him with other creatures. As we go wide as well, it's just going to make it more punishing for them to use removal on our creatures as well. Okay, they specialise the Lae'zel into a white. So that's kind of scary. They do have 2 pretty good attackers. We don't have good blocks for these Lae'zels either, because I can't trade my 3/5 with their 3/6s. I guess I could actually, because theirs only has 6 toughness, which is able to trade off in combat, but it's not a good exchange for us because we haven't specialised our Lae'zel yet. So Welcoming Vampire here is a great draw, because now we can start putting ahead. This is the exact sort of spot where Welcoming Vampire is just sick, where it's kind of a board stall, kind of attrition based. Do we want another Rite of Oblivion here? I mean, we don't have great targets at the moment, but I think the only way we're really going to be losing this game now is if they play a big threat like a Shieldred, so having more answers is pretty good. Plus, it gives us a good way to specialise the Lae'zel. We don't have good targets in the graveyard, so I think we're interested in specialising Lae'zel on white, and discarding Rite of Oblivion to specialise is pretty good, because we can still cast it from the graveyard later in the game. Oh wow, they have the 3rd Lae'zel, okay. I mean, I still like our spot a lot. Now, there is a little bit of dyssynergy here between Welcoming Vampire and Wedding Festivity, because now we've got 2 Wedding Festivities. None of the creatures in our deck are going to be drawing us cards off Welcoming Vampire anymore, because they're all going to be entering with 3 power or higher. But, I mean, if you have 2 Wedding Festivities in play, you're usually going to be winning anyway. And now I feel pretty good about this, because we have 8 power in the air. We can attack them down to 15 here, which is a 2-turn clock with the Welcoming Vampires. So, plus, not even to mention that we can just go wide and attack. We could attack with everything, and then even stuff they block is going to damage them because we have Elemental Core. So, I like this spot quite a lot. You know, we've obviously got a lot of power in play. We could just attack in the air with Welcoming Vampires for a 2-turn clock, or we could start attacking with everything because we already have, you know, 4 tokens, 3 power each. Lae'zel is 5 power with a double strike. Okay, interestingly, Fateful Absence, the LSL core, so that does limit the amount of chip damage that we could do by attacking with everything, but we could still just attack with the Welcoming Vampires if we wanted to. Valorous Stance is nice as well because it gives us an answer to... Okay, sick, we got there, nice. Okay, sweet, so we're going first here. And yeah, this hand looks decent. You know, we've got a really nice curve out here. Welcoming Vampire is always sick. We have so many good draws in the deck that just enable us to start drawing extra cards off it. So, see what the opponent's on here. Okay, Sulphurous Springs. So, probably, I mean, we'll wait to see what the second land is. There's a chance they're on a third colour, but if they're just red-black, that's probably going to be either Anvil or Midrange, I'd imagine. Get to play the LSL core here. Wedding Announcement is a great draw. That works so well with Welcoming Vampire and LSL core as well, especially if against Anvil. Okay, Bloodtithe Harvester, so that doesn't really reveal what they're on. This still could be either Anvil or Rakdos Midrange. Even though LSL core is very good against Rakdos, I would rather get rid of this Bloodtithe Harvester before it's able to kill Welcoming Vampire. I feel like Welcoming Vampire is such an important card in either matchup. If we are against Anvil or red-black midrange, Welcoming Vampire is a card that just tends to run away with the game, so I would rather kill the Bloodtithe Harvester now before it can kill something else better later in the game. Okay, so Braids, I have to imagine they're on Anvil then. So it's a little bit annoying. I mean, I still think it's probably right to trade off that LSL core there, but that is one of the better cards in the matchup. But like I said, I think Welcoming Vampire is just going to tend to run away with the game if they don't have an answer. And all they would need, yeah, they had a second blood card, so all they would need is another blood token card to kill the Welcoming Vampire. So I think on balance, I prefer keeping the Welcoming Vampire alive than the LSL core because it's just going to draw us more cards. It's going to hopefully get us closer to Shieldred or another LSL core, which really, oh well, perfect. Which, yeah, like I said, would really help us pull ahead. So now the opponent's in a pretty tough spot because they need to kill Shieldred and they also need to kill the Welcoming Vampire because they're both going to start running away with the game. We also get to immediately gain 2 off the Welcoming Vampire trigger here because we're going to get another Wedding Announcement token. Oh wow, Lae'zel's great here as well. We already have a Plains in hand to specialise with white if we want. We could also specialise on black to get back LSL core. Get to draw a card, which then triggers the Shieldred, so I feel like we're in a great spot now. You know, they kind of need Mythic Massacre to stabilise, and even then it doesn't even sweep a whole board. Shieldred and Welcoming Vampire both survive here, so... Well, I guess if they do have Meathook, they could use Bloodtithe Harvester to kill the Shieldred as well, but then Welcoming Vampire still survives, which is pretty good for us, so I think, you know, this is a pretty tough spot for the opponent. Okay, they use Bloodtithe Harvester on the Shieldred, so I imagine they've either got Voltage Surge or Meathook Massacre here. Obviously, Meathook Massacre is a lot worse for us, but we still have pretty good ways to recover, I think. Ah, they do have Meathook. Okay, that kind of sucks. So we do lose the Shieldred and all of our other cards, but we do have this Welcoming Vampire in play, which is nice. We get this Cursebound Witch trigger, which we'll definitely use to get Unwilling Ingredient. We want the cheaper card in general. Okay, interesting. So LSL core is a pretty good card in the matchup, and I think I'm just going to play out the Unwilling Ingredient and to get the Welcoming Vampire trigger and Reezug, because if they can't kill Reezug, we can immediately get back Shieldred next turn, which is really nice. I'm going to hold on to the Cursebound Witch to specialise with the Lae'zel, plus if they have another Meathook, I don't want to get completely blown out as well, because they could Meathook for 4 if they have a second one. Okay, they do have the Anvil, but we have Celestial Core going to gain us life. If they don't have a way to kill the Reezug here, we can just get back Shieldred as an artifact. And getting Shieldred back as an artifact is basically just game winning on its own against them, because they're really unlikely to have artifact removal, especially in the main deck, and they basically can't beat Shieldred unless they can get one of their own into play. So sweet, Reezug survives, so we can just get back Shieldred here, which is really good. We'll play the land out, and don't want to take any unnecessary damage off the pain lands. Get to play Shieldred as an artifact, and then that's going to pretty much survive for the rest of the game, I think. And then I think we can afford to attack them with everything. They're going to be going down to 6 off their draw step anyway. And their blood tokens aren't particularly useful now because it'll deal them more damage off the Shieldred. Okay, yeah, opponent just sees that they're not going to win this one. So, against Anvil, we definitely want the Cathar Commandos. This is the main matchup it's here for. Braids is pretty weak because they're going to have, you know, stuff that they want to sack. They're typically going to have more artifacts than us as well, so definitely a matchup where Braids isn't that great. Trying to think what else to cut here. We could trim on the 1-drops because we have less sacrifice payoffs, but then our curve is a little bit higher, so I think I'm going to trim a Wedding Announcement because the value of the tokens isn't as strong if they're also producing their own tokens. So yeah, I think I like running it back like that. I think having Cathar Commando here is huge because, you know, most of their strength and their engines come from Oni Cult Anvil and to a lesser extent Sanguine Brushstroke. You know, getting rid of Brushstroke does limit their reach because they can't just sack blood tokens to take us out. I mean, this is too many lands, too many tap lands as well. Oh wow, okay. Can't keep a 1-lander. So we go down to 5. I think we have to keep, I mean, this is kind of like close to the 7, but maybe a bit better. I mean, obviously it's worse that we have to put more cards back, but it is what it is. I think this hand's, you know, fine. Welcoming Vampire in general is pretty good at helping us recover from weaker hands anyway, so we lead on the Shambling Ghast here. Cathar Commando is very nice at being able to take out Anvil if they have it. That's the main target that we really want to be hitting if we can. So I think I'm going to attack with the Ghast. If they block, we'll just kill it. Oh, well, they do. Okay, I'm pretty happy about that. Now we can just kill the Blood-Tithe Harvester, which again, you know, we got Welcoming Vampire in hand. That is a threat that I would rather survive if possible. So we can flash in the Cathar Commando here. Oh, well, they have Anvil. Okay, so we immediately have an answer for Anvil, which is great. Now, it is kind of risky to flash in the Cathar Commando here because if they have Voltage Surge, they can kill it before we get a chance to kill the Anvil, but I'd rather, you know, I'm not going to waste my mana here. Okay, interesting. I'll attack first just in case they let it through. If they block, we can just sack Cathar Commando in response here. While we would like to get Welcoming Vampire into play to start drawing cards, I think getting rid of Anvil as quickly as possible is the priority here, really. So we can just play the Cursebound Witch, play this Crossroads on black, and then just try and scry to something else. Okay, Reezug is nice. We just want something either high impact like Shieldred or Lae'zel, or something to trigger the Welcoming Vampire so we can start gaining more card advantage here. And then okay, they've got Brushstroke, which is a little bit annoying. I mean, they don't really have good attacks here, though. And Anvil is gone. You know, the power of Blood Artist plus Anvil is pretty powerful. So we could go for Reezug to try and get it online quicker. If we had a Shieldred in the graveyard, I think prioritizing getting Reezug into play would be the goal here. But since we want to start drawing here, we're almost running on empty at this point, so getting Welcoming Vampire into play is a more efficient use of our mana, plus if it survives we get to draw a card off Reezug next turn, which is nice. So just gotta hope the opponent doesn't have a removal spell here. Okay, they do have an Infernal Grasp, which is a little bit annoying but not the end of the world, because now Welcoming Vampire is dead. That is a really good target to bring back with Reezug, so we just gotta hope they don't have another removal spell for the Reezug here, and we've still got a decent game plan, I think. Okay, nice. Cathar Commando gives us something to do with our 2 mana here, which is pretty important as well. Now, like I said, I don't think killing Sanguine Brushstroke is as important, especially if they only have 1 blood token in play like they do right now. I would kind of rather save Cathar Commando for another Anvil if possible, but if they don't play anything else, I could potentially see using it. I mean, the great thing about Cathar Commando in general is we can just use it as an aggressive creature until they play something we want to kill. So we'll pass here, and then, you know, like I said, we can flash in the Cathar Commando. We can also get back Welcoming Vampire as an artifact, which is pretty good in this sort of matchup, you know, because the game is typically going to go quite long. So having that as an artifact in play is just going to continuously produce us card advantage, which is great. Oh wow, they Mythic for 3. So they do have an answer for the Reezug, which is kind of annoying. I mean, thankfully we do get the Cursebound Witch Spellbook card, and they kill their own Blood Artist, which is pretty huge. You know, that can be an issue as the game goes on. I think Unwilling Ingredient is probably the best option here. You know, it is nice to gain some life off the Cauldron Familiar, but the fact that we can get value off Unwilling Ingredient from the graveyard is pretty good, especially considering we're running a little bit on empty right now. So we'll just play out the Unwilling Ingredient here and just pass the turn back. See what the opponent draws here. Okay, they draw an Epicure. Interesting. Okay, and we draw another Cursebound Witch. I think I'll just attack with the Unwilling Ingredient here. I don't want to risk them trading with the Cathar Commando. And since they do have 2 blood tokens, we could use the Cathar Commando now to take out the Brushstroke. We're already down to 11, so that is going to potentially mitigate 2 damage. I mean, maybe it's better to save it for an Anvil, but they don't have any cards in hand, so that is going to save us 2 damage, like I said, when they do eventually use those blood tokens. And with Mythic Massacre in play, I think... Oh, okay. Immediately punished. I mean... I still think it was probably the correct play because we're already down to 11. They have a Mythic Massacre in play. If they'd drawn a dead draw, they could have just immediately... I mean, that's a pretty good draw from us. But if they'd drawn a bad draw, they could just immediately use the blood tokens, and that saves us 2 damage, not to mention any of the other blood tokens they create. And we found an immediate answer, so it ended up working out alright. I think I'm going to get a Witch's Oven here, just because we are down to a relatively low life total here. So we can start gaining a bit of life back. So I like keeping back the Unwilling Ingredient. We can block, potentially sack it to Witch's Oven, and then use it from the graveyard to draw a card. Or we could just block and trade off with a creature. But either way, I like having Witch's Oven as an option to gain a bit of life, because we are getting a little bit low. Okay, they got Fable. That's a pretty good draw. So, see if they attack here. Well, they don't attack. Interesting. So I don't mind sacrificing the Unwilling Ingredient now, and then, because I do want to use Rite of Oblivion to take out the Fable, but I'm going to wait just to see what I draw. Okay, so we draw a land. That's obviously not ideal here. I think we want to take out the Fable, but then we're kind of under pressure from their creatures. I'm trying to think how best to sequence this. I would really like to take out the Fable now if possible. I think we could sacrifice the Unwilling Ingredient to Witch's Oven and then activate the Unwilling Ingredient to see what we draw first. Which I don't mind that. Okay, sweet. So we drew a creature that can block theirs. That's really good. Because the thing is, if we take out the Fable now, we obviously need to take it out before they can start activating Reflection, but then we're very vulnerable to their creatures. Oh wow, they have a Shield Red. Okay, that was a pretty good draw from them. So, we definitely need to take out the Shield Red, so I'm kind of glad that we saved this Rite of Oblivion now. And we could sacrifice the food. I think we want to save this food token since we're already down to 7 here. So we can at least now keep the Welcoming Vampire back to block, and then we can sacrifice the food to go up to 10, because our life total is definitely an issue here, especially because they have Mythic in play. And another Epicure. Okay, so that puts us down to 6. I'm very glad we kept the food token here. Now it's a bit worrying though, because they do have Reflection that can start copying, you know, either the Voldaren Epicure or the 2/2, but we are starting drawing cards here, and we are at an okay life total now. We don't want to see any more lands though. That was a pretty bad draw for us. But I mean, Welcoming Vampire Wedding Announcement is a potential way back into the game, and I think looking back on it now, I'm actually quite glad that we killed the Brushstroke earlier, because we would have been at quite a low life total. You know, we'd have been at least 3 life lower had they had Brushstroke still in play at this point. Okay, they choose to copy the Epicure. Interesting. I mean, I guess that makes sense because it's just dealing more damage. I'm going to lead on the Shambling Ghast here. We do get to draw a card immediately. Maybe we should have Scryed first. Oh, okay, that is a very good draw. So now we can take out the Reflection, which is obviously very important. Then we can create a treasure token off the Shambling Ghast and then flash back the Rite of Oblivion to take out the Mythic Massacre, which is also important because that is going to be dealing us a lot of damage as the game goes on. You know, they could start attacking with everything, and then we'd be in a pretty precarious spot, I think. We're going to scry off the Forsaken Crossroads. Oh wow, perfect. Shieldred on top. So looks like we might be able to stabilize. I think it depends on what they draw here though. This draw step's going to be... Oh wow, okay. I mean, that's pretty unfortunate for us. I mean, thankfully we have our own Shieldred on top, but that was a pretty good draw from the opponent. So we're definitely going to block with everything here. Had Mythic Massacre still been in play, we'd have been in real trouble here. In fact, I think we would probably be dead. Thankfully we have our own Shieldred, and we still get to draw a card off the Welcoming Vampire here. Okay, nice. So we have Takenuma now. We can get back Shieldred. So if they attack, I think we're pretty happy to trade Shieldreds here because we can just get ours back straight away afterwards, which is nice. We'll see what they do here. Hopefully they don't draw removal for the Shieldred, but Takenuma's a nice draw because, like I said, if we trade Shieldreds here, we can get ours back and then just play it immediately next turn. So we'll see what they do. Okay, they attack with both. I mean, we'll definitely trade the Shieldreds here, like I said. I think I'm happy to block with the 1/1 just because, you know, if we block with the 3/4, then they could just kill it with Mythic Massacre postboard, or I mean, I guess Voltage Surge kills it either way, but I'll block like this. While they Voltage Surge, do they not realise that their Shieldred has Death Touch? I mean, that just seems like a complete waste of a Voltage Surge to me. They could have taken out the Welcoming Vampire with that. So that was definitely a misplay on the opponent. We get the Shieldred back now, though, so that was a pretty good turn of events for us, I think. I mean, even though we're down to 4, which is kind of risky, we should still be pretty good here, I think. You know, they need... what would they need to win here? I mean, I can't think of a single card that should deal 4 damage in 1 turn, and we're almost definitely going to be winning on the backswing here, so... But yeah, had they used the Voltage Surge correctly, they would take out the Welcoming Vampire. I mean, I think we still win if they use Voltage Surge on the Welcoming Vampire here. And then, yeah, obviously them using Blood Tokens deals even more damage on the Shieldred, so... I mean, I guess Meathook is pretty scary here. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So had they had Meathook as their top deck, that would have swept our entire board. Now... Oh wow, they had Meathook. So had that been a card sooner, they would have been able to stabilise here, but, you know, as things stand, our Meathook is a 5/6 because of the wedding festivity, so... Wow, okay, that was kind of scary. If they hit Meathook earlier, that would have been a different game, but we ended up getting there, so... Okay, so we're going first here. And yeah, this hand looks good. You know, we've got a decent curve out here. Welcoming Vampire's great, Shieldred's great. Rite of Oblivion is, you know, we don't have a good target to sacrifice to the Rite of Oblivion yet, but still gives us early access to removal if we need it as well. So we're going to lead on the Elasil Core here. And then if we can draw another land, I'd be so happy because then we can go Welcoming Vampire into Lae'zel, which will draw us a card, which is a really nice curve out. Ha. So we do draw Wedding Announcement. I still think I like going Welcoming Vampire here though, because if we do draw a land, being able to go Welcoming Vampire into Lae'zel is a really sick curve, like I said, and even if we don't, we can still play Wedding Announcement, which will draw us a card. So typically I prefer going Wedding Announcement first before Lae'zel. Okay, they have a Void Rend for the Welcoming Vampire. I mean, that is the downside of going for Welcoming Vampire instead of Wedding Announcement, because Wedding Announcement is a lot more difficult to interact with favourably. And we didn't draw a land anyway, so we couldn't have played Lae'zel on curve, but typically I prefer playing Wedding Announcement first, but if I have potential Welcoming Vampire into Lae'zel, I don't mind doing that. Okay, opponent has Shieldred, which is kind of scary, but thankfully we have Rite of Oblivion, and we also have the Wedding Announcement tokens as good ways to sacrifice for the Rite of Oblivion. Going to attack first though, because obviously if the opponent blocks with Shieldred, which I very much doubt they would, but we'll give them the opportunity to. So we get to Rite of Oblivion the Shieldred here, which is really nice. Looks like the opponent's on Esper Midrange. But again, it's very difficult to know exactly what kind of build they're running because there's a million different variants of Esper Midrange that you can run. Okay, so they do have Diviner of Fates here. Kind of annoying that we missed a land drop because they're going to start pulling ahead if they can keep getting tons of card advantage. Okay, Crossroads is a great draw here though, obviously, you know, we really needed to see that 4th land. So we'll play that on white. Unfortunately, since we went first, it does enter tap, so we can't play our own Shieldred or Lae'zel here, but we have land on top, so We know we can go Lae'zel and specialise next turn. Well, they block with Diviner. I'm very happy with that trade. Now we can go Braids, and we can also sacrifice one of our tokens to draw a card here, make the opponent lose 2 life. So they're already down to 10, which is pretty good. You know, we've got him for a lot of chip damage, and the wedding announcement's flipped now, so our creatures are a lot bigger. Well, they do nothing. Interesting. So I'm going to keep the planes in hand because I think I would rather specialise in white because we have... Okay, I was going to say I'm kind of worried about a sweeper here because they're being so slow to develop to the board. And if we specialise on black... I mean, I guess we could specialise on black now to get Braids back. But specialising to hand is kind of appealing as well, just so we have more gas in hand. But we do still have a Shieldred to recover with, so... So we are playing more into a sweeper here, but I think we just want to commit applying pressure. And the great thing about Braids is, you know, like I said, we could have specialised to white to get more resources in our hand, but now we can specialise black on Braids and use Braids to draw a card anyway. So we are kind of getting more gas in our hand by doing it this way anyway. And the opponent kind of needs a sweeper here or a way to chump block because Lae'zel is so good against single target removal. They don't really have a good way to deal with that, so they'd have to kill Braids. I guess they don't need to kill Braids because it's only got 4 power, but I guess they kind of do though, because if they just play a chump blocker for the Lae'zel, we can attack with Braids down to 2 and then just use Braids to sack the wedding announcement, and then they don't have any enchantments in place, so they'd lose 2 off that. So they kind of need a sweeper here. Now again, like I said, we could have specialised the Lae'zel on white. Okay, they do have a farewell. So that explains why they were so slow to commit to the board. Maybe it would have been better to specialise the Lae'zel on white so we have more stuff in hand, but specialising on black for Braids and drawing a card does a very similar thing. Now granted, we did draw land instead of a guaranteed non-land card that the white specialise would provide us, but I still think that was fine. Okay, Plunder, I mean, it is very risky not discarding the Braids there as well. We could... Because if they draw a blocker or a way to gain life, like if they get their own Shieldred off that... Yeah, okay, so they did get a blocker, so there is definitely an argument to discarding both cards there, and then they would need to draw their own blocker. It looks like they're playing more of a controlling variant, so it is possible that we could have just won had we discarded both cards there, but I also feel like throwing away a Braids to an Undercity Plunder is also pretty bad because then we have nothing. You know, it could just be kind of a bluff from the opponent where they have a way to kill Shieldred and then we're just completely out of gas entirely. So hard to say what the right play there was. I think it's pretty close. You know, we could have discarded the Braids and we could have just won off an attack off the Shieldred there. Oh wow, they bounced the Shieldred. So they did have an answer to Shieldred. So I think keeping the Braids was probably the right line there. And then I'm happy to sack a land. We have more than enough mana, you know, for anything we might draw off the top. Yeah, forces the opponent to sack a land. They also have a lot of mana. So they need, again, they need 2 answers or another sweeper here, I think. Or, like, they don't seem to be running that many chump blockers. It looks like they're playing a slightly more controlling variant with fewer creatures from what we've seen so far. Okay, yeah, Liliana plays into what I was thinking with that. So we'll definitely sack the Braids here. And now they're dead to the next draw step unless they have a kill spell for the Shieldred. See what else they have. They definitely have something here, or Arena would just skip to the end of their turn. Okay, they just scoop it. Nice. Okay, so we're against Esper here, but it looks like they're more a controlling variant. I mean, Valorous Stance is good against Esper in general. I mean, they did seem to have exile removal in Farewell, but I do imagine they probably have their own Shieldred, so... Or they probably will post Sideboard anyway. Oh, okay. So they do have Shieldred. So I think we probably want Valorant Stance as a way to protect our own creatures from stuff like Infernal Grasp and to kill their Shieldred. Elessil Core is probably, you know, it's fine, but it's probably a little too slow in the matchup. You know, it's basically just a 2-2 that will deal the opponent damage when they kill our creatures, but then they don't seem to be running destruction-based sweepers. They were running Farewell, so I don't think it's got that much value. And everything else in the deck seems pretty good, so just run it back like that, I think. So this hand looks pretty good to me. You know, again, we've got a nice curve out. Okay, Shambling Ghast on 1 is really nice here. And then we can go Reezug into Wedding Announcement into Welcoming Vampire, depending on what we draw, obviously. Okay, Viconia is pretty good against us because they can exile Rite of Oblivion, they can stop us bringing stuff back with the Reezug, so I'm going to sack the Shambling Ghast and get rid of this Viconia now, because if we ever use Rite of Oblivion on something else, they're just going to use Viconia to exile the Rite of Oblivion from the graveyard, so that's the priority here. Okay, looks like opponent missed a land drop, which is obviously good for us. They must have a lot of gas in hand though, so I imagine they've got removal, so I think I'm going to play the Wedding Announcement first here. Okay, they hit their third land drop, and they have Diviner, which is obviously pretty good. Wow, they pitch a Shieldred. They must have a second one for them to do that, surely. So, I mean, we could have saved the Iganjo to use as a spell land, but I like just playing it out here so that we can potentially scry off the Crossroads. I like getting Reezug into play as well now because it just immediately gets us value off the Welcoming Vampire. Oh wow, they're playing Oracle, interesting. Okay. So we'll just go for Wedding Announcement here, play the Crossroads, and we can just scry here, I think. And then I think we're interested in using the waste of our mana. We can just get back the Shambling Ghast, and now we have Shambling Ghast as an artifact to be able to sacrifice to the Rite of Oblivion when we want to use the flashback on that. We get to draw another card off the Welcoming Vampire here as well, so we're on the front foot definitely. But we are vulnerable to sweepers. I mean, thankfully we have Lae'zel in hand now, which is nice, as kind of a way to recover. And I think if the opponent doesn't really play anything here, we can just start attacking with everything, even though they have two blockers. You know, the fact that Welcoming Vamp is now 3/4 means that they can't cleanly block it with Oracle anymore. Okay, another Diviner. So, I mean, obviously the opponent missing lands is great for us. Wow, they're playing Ascend from Avernus. Interesting. Wow, they missed land drops again? Okay, that obviously sucks for the opponent, but the scary thing is, like, we need to apply pressure now because we know their hand is just all gas if they're missing land drops, so I think we need to really just start closing this game out here. I mean, again, you know, we could attack with everything, but I think just throwing away the 2/2s is pretty bad here. And I am worried about sweepers. I mean, we do get to draw another card off the Welcoming Vampire, so we do have decent ways to recover if they do have a sweeper, but I don't just want to attack in with everything and just potentially throw stuff away here. Okay, they do have a Shieldred of their own. We could kill it with the Valorous Stance, but I think I'd rather save that. You know, we have... Oh, wow, we drew a Shieldred of our own as well, which is nice. Okay, so I think we just want to use the Rite of Oblivion here. We can sacrifice the Shambling Ghast that we got earlier, and I'd like to save the Valorous Stance to protect one of our creatures potentially. I think at this point, since we have 5 tokens, we can start attacking them with everything. Now, they could obviously block 2 of our 2/2s, but they're still taking a ton of damage off our other creatures, so we already put them down to 9, which is sick. And then we can play Shieldred of our own. Now, there is a potential argument to trying to wait a turn to play the Shieldred, because we can then protect it with the Valorous Stance, but at this point they need like exactly depopulate to survive, and I don't think they're playing that. If they were on 5 lands, I think I would probably hold the Shieldred because of Farewell, but they can't possibly have Farewell because they only have 5 mana here, so they would need depopulate, which we haven't seen, and we still have good ways to recover from that since we have Lae'zel, so... Plus we have Reezug as well. Yeah, okay, sweet, we got there, nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And normally I really don't like keeping hands that don't have a second colour of mana, but we have a playable curve with just black here, so I'm going to risk it. Okay, drawing another white card without a white land is a little bit spooky, but I mean, again, you know, even if we don't draw any lands, we can still go Cursebound Witch, Reezug into Braids, which is fine. You know, Braids, as long as Cursebound Witch survives, can draw us another card as well, potentially. Okay, so we'll attack with the Witch first here. It looks like the opponent has... I have to imagine they're playing a domain deck of some sort. Okay, they cut down the Reezug, that makes sense. And another Triome. Okay, so we have Crossroads to produce white mana, which is really nice. Unfortunately, we... Wait, did we go first, or... no, let me think. No, we went second, so we can play the Crossroads on white. I wish there was some way... Which do we want here? I mean, Witch's Vengeance is always appealing because it's the only removal spell in the spellbook, but Curse of Leeches is nice to just pressure the opponent. They cleave on Dig Up. Interesting. So are they playing Oracle Turns with Micromancer maybe? That's the only card that's the only deck that I've really seen with Dig Up recently. We'll play the Welcoming Vampire into Shambling Ghast, start drawing cards here, which is pretty nice. And then we can sacrifice the Shambling Ghast to the Braids, puts them down to 11, and we get a treasure token as well, which is nice. You know, that's another target that we can sacrifice to the Rite of Oblivion and to Braids as well. Okay, so they are playing Oracle of the Alpha, makes sense. You know, I can't see anyone running Dig Up unless they're running Micromancer. Okay, we've got quite a few options here. I mean, we could use Rite of Oblivion on the Oracle, because I don't think they're really going to have many other ways to... I don't think they're going to have many other good targets for it, really. Now we've drawn Shieldred. I think I like just going for Shieldred. Okay, they attack with... They block the 3-3, which makes sense, because we can sacrifice the Shambling Ghast and give the Oracle -1/-1 if they block the Welcoming Vampire. So, now we can pass the turn. They take 2 off the Shieldred down to 5. And, I mean, they do have... the domain sweeper, I'd imagine, but yeah, I don't know. I think we're in a pretty good spot here. We managed to get off to a fairly fast start. I mean, the big weakness of their deck is it's quite slow, from what I've seen anyway. I know people are still working on the lists, but well, they timed. Okay, I mean that's just going to completely kill them because of Shieldred, right? Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty good way to go out if you're going to go out that way. So yeah, I mean, I think this matchup should be pretty good overall from my experience. We definitely want Unlicensed Hearse because if they're running the list that I've seen, like the list I've seen with this deck, we can't actually see what they're playing because Time Twisters put everything back, but most of the lists that I've seen so far have been Shigeki, like looping the Time Warp with Shigeki. I think Reezug is too slow. I think we just need to race the way to, because obviously they're a combo deck, they have a very good... Well, they have an incredibly strong late game once they can start looping Time Warp, so I don't think we really have that much time to start using Reezug. I mean, Reezug getting back Shieldred is pretty good if they're taking infinite turns, if they don't have artifact removal, but I think our best game... the game plan that gives us the best shot of winning is probably just being as aggressive as possible here. But yeah, well, I still haven't seen everything, so I'm not 100% sure exactly what they're running, but like I said, most of the kind of taking turns lists that I've seen, especially with Dig Up, are running Micromancer to get your Dig Up to search for your combo pieces. Okay, so they do have Oracle, which does kind of slow us down a bit. We could Rite of Oblivion here, but I'm not sure that really like, stopping them getting the scries off the attack is pretty important, but I think in terms of just presenting a fast clock, it's better to get Wedding Announcement in play here, because if they do start attacking, they're not going to have anything to block. So we can just start attacking back anyway. And if they don't attack, we can just use Rite of Oblivion anyway. So they do attack, makes sense, because the Scry in a combo deck is pretty valuable. Let's see what else they have here. Okay, they do have Shigeki. So I think that's a card we're pretty interested in taking out here. Now, there is an argument, like, I think we want to go Rite of Oblivion and LSL Core. We do get punished if they have Undersimplify here, but in a domain deck, I very much doubt they're running Undersimplify, so I'm going to risk doing it this way, and then this will deal them an extra damage off the LSL core, which is important, I think, you know. From our point of view, we just want to kill them as quickly as possible, so every point of damage is going to matter. So I want to take out the Shigeki here because their endgame revolves around looping Shigekis, and so I don't want them to have access to them, you know. I'd rather get rid of them immediately before they have a chance to start looping them, because I think from what I've seen their endgame is getting to a point where they can channel Shigeki to get back Time Warp, plus another Shigeki to just loop every single turn. Okay. So, I think I like Witch's Vengeance here as just a way to kill the Oracle of the Alpha. You know, Witch's Vengeance is the only removal spell in the spellbook, so... And I like keeping the treasure token around. We could have played the Cursebound Witch just to get another creature in play, but I like keeping it in hand. First of all, as it's kind of hedges against sweepers, but also I like keeping the treasure as a way to sacrifice
to Rite of Oblivion to kill something like an Oracle. Okay, they did have the sweeper, so I'm kind of glad I held on to the Cursebound Witch here. Okay, LSL cause a decent draw here, because if they have another sweeper, we can deal them more damage off it. And now we'll get another token off the wedding announcement, and it will flip. And now, you know, we've got, how much power? We've got 7 power in play, so they're already on a 2-turn clock here. They kind of need more removal here, or to start comboing off. Okay, they dig up for a land. Interesting. See what else they've got here. Okay, they Urborg Repossession back the Oracle. Puts another lot of power 9 into the deck. I think we'll just Witch's Vengeance on Bird here. Kills the Oracle. And we could hold on to Takenuma here. I think with 4 mana we can probably afford to do that. Especially because if they use a sweeper, we can use Takenuma in response. Oh no, wait, we only have 1 legendary creature. For some reason I thought we could use the Takenuma now. But either way, just in case they have another sweeper, I like holding on to Takenuma in case we draw dead. It gives us a way to get back one of our creatures. You know, potentially gets back a Shieldred or something if we mill it over. So what else do they have here? They kind of need cut down or a creature to block, I guess. I mean, either way, we have Rite of Oblivion here. So they kind of need cut down to stabilize. You know, they have to cut down the LSL core. Wow, they have nothing. Okay, sweet, we got there.